This is Ibrox.
Hi and welcome to this episode of the Rangers Review. I'm Tommy McIntyre from This is Ibrox, hosting for once. And much like a manager who's just found out he's not got the qualifications for the job, I have cast about to make sure I've got the best team possible to cover for me. And that means I'm delighted to be joined by regulars, YouTube's CJNOVO992. CJ, how are you doing?
I'm alright, mate. How's yourself?
I am very, very well, but I'm the chair this week, so I don't particularly matter. I'm also joined by Heart and Hands, David Edgar. David, how are you doing?
Hello, everyone. Yes, great to be back.
Good stuff. And I'm also joined, last but definitely not least, with four lads. Stevie Clifford. Stevie, how are you doing?
Mate, did you almost forget who we were there?
He did, didn't he?
It genuinely felt like he did. We're an afterthought. Like.
Guys, I have got a limited capacity. I'm trying to breathe and talk at the same time. I feel like he's just
read our names off a list that is like CJ. CJ. Yep. Is that Novo? No. Yep. CJ Novo. Hello.
YouTuber. Yeah. Right.
I have to admit, I am just a Russian bot from just outside Moscow, guys. You're getting limited interaction from me this evening. It's as simple as that.
Well, I mean, it's the season of YouTubers, isn't it? Why are you not fighting Floyd Mayweather, CJ?
He's too scared to fight me, mate. He's too scared.
A challenge has been laid down.
Doesn't he want this sauce, mate? Doesn't he want it?
I look forward to the. I don't know what the sauce is, to be honest with you, but I look forward to the sauce between yourself, Mayweather, and is it Logan Paul?
One of them, whichever one. Sir, I'm shouting myself. If anyone came back, I'd fold a deck chair.
Oh. I don't think there's any disgrace in losing a fight to Floyd Mayweather.
No, that's true, mate.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would describe you as being savaged by a sparrow. So, moving swiftly on, now that I'm into my rhythm and I can put the notes to one side with all your names on it, I will say we've got a hell of a lot to get through and we don't have 100 days to do it. So, starting, and I'll turn to yourself. What's that say again? CJNOVO992. In terms of, we've cycled off a dramatic and historic season, and obviously there's been lots of talk and lots of title parties and probably a couple of after parties as well. But as you turn round and look back over the track, what would be your defining moment of the season and why?
Oh, that's a good question. There's a couple that comes to my mind right away, but I'd say it's going to be that game versus Motherwell for me when we were down just after the Cup exit, when everyone started to question the team. And that moment when we managed to come back and win that game, and the fact that it was our signings that we brought in the summer, the Kamal Roofs, the Cedric Ettins, it was them that came in and had done it. That was the defining moment for the season for me, because I went and says, right, this is a different animal this year.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. I think that game did for Stephen Robinson as well, didn't it? In terms of parking the bus at Ibrox.
He played a 5-5. That's staunch for him. I like it.
Pretty much. I think he'd have pulled other people at the stand if there'd been any supporters in, to be honest with you. David, if I turn that question over to yourself as well, and CJ's obviously picked a game. Could be a game, could be a person. I'm just really interested where your thoughts are.
Yeah, I struggle to pick it again because the thing about this side this season, Motherwell is because of it's the only time really where we've been in serious, my goodness, what will happen because of the defeat against St Mirren, how they would react to it. And more importantly, I think how we would react to it as supporters, because I think that if you look at maybe the Livingston game, the draw that day early in the season, the reaction from us as supporters, looking back, I kind of look at some of the stuff I was saying and think, because we were so conditioned by the last 10 years, really. My abiding memory, therefore, of this season has just been watching the club and the support and the team. We've all sort of regained our swagger, and maybe there's this, we've said before, it's like having the real Rangers back. No, this is the real Rangers back now. There's a big silver thing sitting there. We're the champions. We've smashed everybody. Nobody could get near us. And for me, it's just been my key memory of this season is just watching us as supporters embrace this. And I've said this before. It should be impossible for a team and a support to bond as closely as this team and the support have bonded this season when there's no fans in, and they've managed it. And I think that's a testimony to they're likeable guys, I think. And as we know in modern football, that's not always the case. But they get us. And I think as a support, we recognise when people are giving us BS or when they're giving us it from the heart. And I think this side gives us it from the heart.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on, and I would say to the listeners as well, judging by the conversation that I joined just before we started recording, hearing David say "big silver thing" actually made me titter in the background as well. Stevie, if I turn to you with that question, and I'm also quite interested because I intend to ask the guys as well, in terms of any special mentions for the likes of the journey that a Gerrard and a Tav have been through, but more importantly, what would be your moment of the season?
It's hard not to say the Motherwell game because it was such a big win and the boys have obviously touched on it, but journey back slightly before that, and I would go back to the Kilmarnock game at Rugby Park. May not seem like such a huge defining moment, but it came the week after the victory at Celtic Park, if I remember correctly, and we've had a habit of doing unbelievable results and reaching highs and then falling on our face straight away. So with that being such a difficult fixture on that pitch, regardless of what happened to Kilmarnock in the end, it's always difficult going down there. And I always famously remember David tweeted out straight after it at full time, "We're going to win the league." And and everybody went into meltdown over that, and he was like, "Well, even if we don't, it's not going to be my fault," kind of thing. But we had a joke about it at the time as well. But that turned out to me, it's difficult to pinpoint players because there's been so many that have been so good. Goldson, Tav, Morelos, etc. Roof at different points. Everybody has been. Ryan Kent's been phenomenal. You can mention and should mention every one of them. But result-wise, Kilmarnock was really, really big, especially on the back of that Old Firm victory and kicking on and really pushing on, because I think that would have given the team and the squad such a boost to come through that Old Firm and then to go there in a place where they've really struggled in the last couple of years and get that result, even if they didn't play as well as they could have, but to get that result perfect in it, and it sets us up, and in every little moment like that we've kicked on. So since Motherwell was already spoke about, I would go for that Kilmarnock match.
Oh, it's an interesting one, and one that I chose myself, has to be said. So David, if I switch back for you for a moment here, I touched on wanting to understand there's a hell of a lot to be said for the personal journeys of Steven Gerrard and James Tavernier. Stevie's also referenced some of those other players that were in the Player of the Year conversations as well. But I'm just really interested from this group here, starting with you, that Gerrard-Tav dynamic and the story that each of them have, how important has that been this season?
I think that the growth of this side, the manager, the players has been enormous, and they have had to go through highs and lows, and incredible highs, but really, really almost subterranean lows at times. But it's toughened them mentally, I think, and it focused them. And I'll be honest, I think that, like a lot of people, after Hearts and Hamilton last year, I'm not necessarily sure I saw some of the players being able to do this. I think that because they've had that experience of, maybe not getting too high at times, not getting too low at others, I think they've came through it this season, in a way that's almost been perfect in terms of mentality. The two cup defeats were very disappointing, we know that, but equally the response both times was fantastic. This year, for the first time, I think under Gerrard, we were able to put together a run. I mean, we were undefeated all season, but there was that spectacular run of victories really from Livingston that went all the way right through to basically, I think, Hamilton.
I think it was 17 games, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was just fantastic, and I think that was a mentality thing. I think that with this side, they just seem to grow up. And I don't mean that that they were badly behaved or anything, immature or whatever. I just think that they had to arrive in a space and develop into having that toughness, that exterior. Remember, we're only 15 months away from Ryan Kent saying they preferred to play in Europe because it was less pressure.
Yeah.
So something happened during that lockdown, whether it was having that extra time gave them a chance to reflect, and I think also realise we're not that far off, that we are a good side, and if we just believe in ourselves at key moments, then we'll get somewhere. Gerrard, Stevie and I are doing a series at the moment about him called Evolution of a Revolution, and I think that thank you. I think that is something that's very important. Steven Gerrard in 2021 is not the guy who pitched up at 2018. Of course, essentially he still is in the qualifications. The outlook that he has, qualifications, quite important for a manager. But I think that it's, his development in that 3 years is enormous. It really is. And I do think that when he arrived, he was a good potential manager. Now he's a very good manager.
Yeah, I think it's certainly agree with that sentiment as well. So, CJ, if I turn to you and picked on, particularly Steven Gerrard and James Tavernier there, particularly from a Tavernier perspective, how important do you think it is for him personally, but also the club, that he's been able to see through this particular part of the journey and get his hands on, to quote David, that big silver thing?
The big silver thing indeed. No, I think it's massive, and even at the start of the season, I think we mentioned it on our second show. I mentioned it. Gerrard kind of in passing said in an interview that Tavernier, when he came back, brought in stuff that he wanted to work on, that he had went back and looked at. So I think the time when the season obviously ended the way it did, and we had those couple of weeks, and then we were back in, it gave the players, the management, and the coaching staff time to reflect on what was going right and what was going wrong. And I just feel like the attitude and everything just came absolutely meshed perfectly into this season. I thought Tavernier just really set the tone. I mean, his early season form was frightening, and I know he obviously had that bad injury, and I'm not saying he had a bad second half of the season, but he really set the tone, and that's what you need for your captain, because we all know what was on the line for this season. We all know what was said about Tavernier. I mean, you had an idiot calling him, what was it, sudden failure or something like that in the press all the time. So there's a lot of pressure, and I love the way he just came in and he set the tone himself, scoring and assisting. And even in that Kilmarnock game that Stevie just mentioned, I'm sure it was a Tavernier penalty earlier in that game, and we managed to see it out. So for me, I just love the way the players have went, right, I'm not going to wait for someone else to do it or he to do it, I'm going to do it. And I feel like every single one of them's had that attitude the entire season and had each other's backs when something went right, like you've seen, obviously, the cup exits.
Yeah, I think that evolution point that you guys are talking about, and you can see that evolution just from my opening comments on this pod. I've settled into a rhythm now, so as I go across to you, Stevie, nice and smoothly there, without reading it off my sheet. In terms of that, I work in an industry that culture is a really, really big thing, and you're looking at someone like James Tavernier, and I'm putting a slight twist on this question for you in terms of the younger players round about the squad, looking up to senior players, seeing a senior player who's been barracked in the press, to a certain extent barracked by their own support as well, for a period, come through less than stellar teams, seen the course, played like a Ranger, done Rangers things as in pick up titles. How important do you think that is for academy players coming through the club to see that from a cultural aspect?
I'll just come in for Stevie here, as he's been called away briefly. But
is there a wee substitution going on here?
Well, hold on there. Nobody informed me. I've been caught out.
It would be like one of the ones in fives, because he'll be back in a few seconds. But the joys of parenthood, and of course, like any good parent, that he has his priorities right. No, but I think it is really important to have the opportunity, because otherwise, if you're going in and you're training every day and there's no possible route to success, then that's I'm sure we've all had jobs where you've eventually had to leave because you just don't see that progression, you don't see that path. And I think if you have ambition, and you need ambition to be a success at Rangers, you can't be somebody who's content and comfortable.
Happy to be there, absolutely.
No, 100%. And we've seen big players, I think, make the mistake of arriving at Rangers, signings, and think the job's done. And it's no, the job just starting now. So for these guys at Rangers, who are aggressive and driven, to see what Nathan Patterson's achieved this season, I think is superb. And one of the things that I like that I've been struck by is Gerrard was asked, for instance, about towards the end of the season, would you bring in youngsters to fill the bench, basically, because obviously injuries and suspensions and COVID had bit in, and he said no, the ones who are there have earned it. And I really like that because because it's not a participation prize. Leon King was there because Leon King deserved it, and Nathan Patterson was there because Nathan Patterson deserved it. And what that shows the rest of the boys is, well, firstly, you can do this because they're doing it, but secondly, look at Leon, look at Nathan. What did they do? What did they bring? Their attitude and training was spot on, and I think you then begin to ask yourself as a person, could I do more? Is it that I'm not getting an opportunity, or is it that I'm not doing what they did? So for too long, when I was growing up at Rangers, we didn't bring through youngsters. We just didn't, and there was a glass wall, and part of that was us as a support. I was very much a case of, we'll just buy somebody, because we could. We had the money and there was no transfer windows. So just buy somebody. It was quicker and it was easier and more glam, But now we're in a position where I think that we can... I think that we can do it. I'm so excited about Nathan Patterson. I mean, super excited, because I keep watching him and I look for weaknesses in his game, and I can't see many. And that's not to say that there's not things he can get better at, things he will get better at, but there's nothing I watch and say, there's a big glaring gap. And that's, someone could exploit that, or that could be his Achilles heel. I just think he's solid. And one of the nights for me that really was probably his toughest night playing for Rangers was away in Prague. And he was up against one hell of an opponent, a really, really big, powerful attacker. And the first 45 minutes, he got put through the ringer, but he got better and better, and he came onto it. And I thought, yes, that will do for me, because he didn't hide, he didn't get any shadow. He didn't even think, well, I'm having a tough night, but I'll be good on Saturday. He just stuck in and got better and better and better. And, where we're sitting recording just now, we're just before the internationals, he's been called into the squad. I think once he gets his chance in that Scotland team, he won't look back. He won't be out of that side, because there's no one near him. There's nobody near him, no. and I think as soon as he gets in and people just start seeing his ability. Now, long term, we're going to obviously have a question to answer. Where do you play? We'll see.
I think that's absolutely spot on, and I'll save maybe the conversation about the Euros to later on in this podcast. But CJ, if I turn to you just there immediately, because David was talking about some things that I think are really, really key here. I also believe that we've been rejoined by Stevie, fresh off the bench as well. But CJ, to you directly, in terms of that cultural shift internally, and lots has been spoken about this management team, lots has been spoken about the support by the club, the board members, etc. But principally, the ability to turn around this group of players, even from the Gerrard era failures, has to be said, in the initial phase of not being able to achieve some of the goals. How absolutely fundamental has that been to not just the rebirth on the pitch, but that rebirth of a cultural nature with the fan base as well, to see that everybody's in one direction, everybody's playing for that winning mentality?
It's absolutely massive. I mean, you look at the team now, and it's not just like the 11 all that gets on, or the 18. It's everyone associated with that football club genuinely likes each other, and that's very rare in football, where people will actually look out there and they want to hang out, they want to have a laugh, they're interacting, everything like. You normally get kind of like the robot feature where you go down south and you say, oh, what this, and then they're kind of off scat and go their own ways, but they're actually want to hang out. They actually genuinely like each other, and the atmosphere in the dressing room must be absolutely amazing. But on the flip side, when things haven't been gone right, or if something's went wrong, they're not afraid to dig each other out as well. And we've heard that with the likes of with the interviews and everything. They say Jacko's very vocal in training. He puts the pressure on. And you've heard it before Connor Gold. You hear it from Tavernier, and you can hear that throughout the team now. That if someone does make a mistake, there'll be somebody there to help him, but also tell him that he's done a mistake. And you can't overlook the way our dressing room feels and works together to why we've been able to do it so successfully on the park. It's because of the relationships they built off it.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And Stevie, if I turn to you now, I'm really interested in your views of, we had a phenomenal title win, long, held up water behind the dam, so to speak, that spilled out, and rightly or wrongly, people celebrating, etc. I'm less concerned with that aspect and more interested from this group here, starting with you, in terms of the vitriolic media and political reaction to the celebrations that Rangers had. And by that I mean people jumping on the bandwagon, such as, Willy Wanker's video and stuff like that, the police getting involved. And we obviously need to be careful when we're having these types of discussions, but have you been surprised by how quickly people wanted to jump in to the conversation without taking the time to review evidence?
No. It's Rangers, and well, how do I put this? We are a great distraction to failures that might be right under their nose of their own party or own particular situation. So without elaborating, because I don't think it's a worthy discussion, to be honest, in terms of those that try to undermine us and constantly, bitch and moan about whatever it is we do, Rangers could come out and say that the sky was blue and they would argue with us. So in terms of, was a surprise? No. And in terms of why do I think it happened because we're a great distraction. And, when you have a failing party and a failing government or whatever, then Rangers are massive. We're at least 50% supported by this country, if you want to argue it that way. And the others don't. So it's a great opportunity to distract and cause diversions away from what's really going on. And I think that was the situation. The media reaction was typical, but that's why we don't deal with media in this country, or should I say that's why we have very limited dealings with media in this country as a club themselves. So it's not something I want to get bogged down in really in discussing, but the reaction wasn't surprising, no.
No, and I completely agree that I don't want to spend overly long talking about it, and actually I want to put a different filter over that particular question anyway as I turn to David, and less about the specifics of Rangers and the specifics of that conversation. Do you think some of this plays into a narrative of a classist agenda when it comes to football fans, by definition, are always seen as bad when it comes to the media and politicians at large?
I think certainly that's the case. I think that's the case in the UK and probably Europe, but I think there is a specificity. Yeah, that's easy for me to say. I think
what was that?
Specificity.
The trick, guys, is to write it down. The trick is to write it down.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a specificity to what happens to us in Scotland, and a lot of that is to do with politics. A lot of that is to do with people who don't necessarily like us, but then decide what we think. And it's because we are seen as unionist, because we are seen as very much being against the current ruling party in Scotland and the vast majority of the mainstream media, that they get to pick on us, and they get to... some of the reaction, some of the articles, and as we know, Rangers are taking legal action over them, was ridiculous. And you would not be allowed to write that sort of thing about any other segment of the society. You wouldn't get into a newspaper with it, but yet it was actively encouraged. And as Stevie said, these articles were written the week before, just lying in wait. I think that there is very much a classist element. I think there's also an element that it's easy to dehumanise if you need an opponent. If if your entire shtick is based on exceptionalism and how different we are to, we're different to them, and that's why we're better than them, then you need opponents, be it English people, be it other people within Scotland, and we fit into that category. But the thing for me about this whole thing was what you've seen from the Rangers support is something that you wouldn't have seen from the Rangers support maybe 20 years ago, and that is the unified response. And it has been everybody just standing shoulder to shoulder and saying, right, well, okay, we're over here, and we're going to fight back and we're going to disagree with you. And I think that that's hugely important, and I think it's important that the club follow through on this, because there do need to be consequences. We do have to accept that people are allowed not to like us. That's, nothing we can do about that. People have their own bigotry, and therefore we can't change that. But you can't tell lies about us, and you can't treat us differently. And I think that we saw over the last couple of weeks that there are people, important people in Scotland, who think that they can treat us differently, and I think that's the kind of worrying thing that came out of it. But I loved the Rangers fans' reaction to it, which is just to stand together and say, nah, we're united and we know where we're going. And I get that sense from the club as a whole, and from the side, management, players, board, fans. I think we're all very much in a really, really good place. We've emerged out of this long, dark tunnel. And for me, I think that currently, because you never know, things can happen, but currently you don't need to look very far to see an example of a situation of a club that's not like that.
Yes, and I think that's a very fair point, and I completely agree with you on the exceptionalism. Everybody needs a bogeyman underneath the bed, so to speak. So, CJ, if I come to you, and moving away from that particular question now, I'm really interested. We're looking ahead. We've discussed some of the players, etc. We know the Euros are just round the corner. There'll be fan zones, etc. in Scotland. Great timing, obviously. Scratch of the head moment for some other people, but we've got some players going to that tournament. We've got Herlander, we've got Barisic, Patterson, Kamara, and we've touched on Patterson earlier. I'm really interested from your perspective. One, who do you think is really going to be the shining light in there? And I'll widen out to the group to discuss all the players. But also, how important is this from a business model perspective as we start to see our first team players go off to top tier tournaments?
Well, it's actually a video that I've been planning to do now on Monday, so this is getting a wee sneak preview for the old Rangers players that's gone out there. But you're spot on there. It makes us look good. If our players go there and they have a great tournament, that says, who does he play for? And that starts bringing us up more in the conversation. But to answer your question about the one player that I think is going to have probably the best Euros, and it's the player I'm terrified is going to have the best Euros, and that's Glenn Kamara. I am absolutely terrified he goes there and does what he does, because everyone's going to look at him and everyone's going to say, he's absolutely fantastic. So I'm quite dreading that. But I do think he's going to be the one guy that can go out there, especially Finland's a team I've been looking at them heavily a lot for the upcoming video, and they're a team that just goes about their business. They've not got any egos, they're just hard working. They're very reminiscent of the Iceland team a couple of years ago that obviously surprised England and put them out and stuff like that. They've just got that hard working outfit, and Glenn Kamara is such an important piece in that team to make him work. So I can really see him having a fantastic Euro, starting every game, playing every minute, and probably surprising a lot of people.
Yeah, and I appreciate that sneak peek of what's coming up on your channel there. I would say, CJ, you need to invest in a better firewall. I'm sitting looking at your files, obviously, and I'm just reading off what you're going to be putting out on your content. Stevie, if I turn to you with that particular question, and I agree with CJ, I think he's absolutely spot on there. I think everything taken in aggregate, Glenn Kamara, the price, the style of play, the ability to perform on the big stage, etc., and an exciting young player. But who for you stands out, and why would that be the case? And maybe put the inflection on it, I suppose, of who might we be happiest to lose from those four players?
I don't think we'd be happy to lose anyone from the squad.
Also, John McLaughlin's there as well.
Quite true, CJ.
We don't want to lose anyone, but they all have the potential to excel. I think they're all top players. I think that CJ is right, and when he says Glenn Kamara, I think Borna Barisic as well, they've got the chance to really stand out But Philip Hollander as well is such a solid defender and performing as well that he could really be a standout. In regards to Nathan Patterson, I'm not sure that Nathan Patterson will get much game time. He should get game time, but I'm not sure he will.
Yeah.
But all four of them, and even John McLaughlin, again, I know we're biased, but when you look at the goals conceded the other night, I really think that John McLaughlin deserves a chance to start, and not in a game against Luxembourg where it'll tell you absolutely nothing either.
Yeah.
But
Nailed it.
I think that each player is their own merit. I think they could all shine if they're given the opportunity. In terms of excelling, you're looking at Barisic and Kamara being the ones, but if we go back to the question of who can we afford to lose or whatever from the squad, the answer is none of them.
Yeah.
Realistically, we know that if big money comes in for a certain player, that we might have to look at selling. But all I would say is I hope that big money is actually big money. When you're talking about Yanis Hadji going for 15 million, I don't consider that to be big money for Yanis Hadji.
Nope.
You need to stick another 5 on that before I'd even be interested. And people might say 20 million for Yanis Hadji, and I would argue the point that Yanis Hadji is, young, an international starter, a game changer.
I would say that Yanis Hadji is very much the equivalent of letting a bet run. Because we're being offered a superb cash out, but
Absolutely.
But Yanis Hadji in 2 years, I think, is going to be worth a significant amount of money more. And surely we all should learn. I'd written Borna Barisic off at the end of his first season. I'll hold my hands up to that. I thought he was done at Rangers. How wrong was I? Ryan Kent is a far better player now than even in his first season when we all liked him and wanted him to stay, but he's much better now. Even Alfie, he's got better year on year on year. So, Hadji, I think, will be the same as that. But what I think is encouraging is that instead of getting to the summer and going, good, it's a chance to get rid of him, and him, which was kind of, the past decade, I will be gutted when guys from this team go, because, I just really like them, and I appreciate what they've done for us. And I think that, that was, I got a bit of criticism, and I think, in fact, I know that the other boys on here did, about the cup defeat, that while I was absolutely, a St Johnstone one, while I was absolutely gutted, I wasn't really in a pitchfork mood.
Exactly.
And maybe that is, but any team that secured us 55, but the way they did it, the fact they gave us, 6 months of lording it, and we're not even into the summer yet, 6 months of lording it over the rest of Scottish football, that was special to me. And, I just look at the guys in terms of where I think they could be in 2 to 3 year time. Borna, 29, so probably, not. This is maybe him at his peak years. But I look at Glenn Kamara and I think, I can't see a league you couldn't play in.
That's exactly spot on, mate.
La Liga, Serie A, EPL, I think you would be a star in all of them. I look at Hadji and I think, man, I look at Kent and I just, wow. And then quite often I'll sit and I'll watch the EPL. And there'll be these sides, decent sides that are all sort of mid-level, and they've all got strikers that cost 30, 40 million. And I think, are you honestly telling me Alfie wouldn't do a much better job for them? Now, I'm not chasing any of these guys. I'd love them to stay for years and years and years. But I suppose it's a good thing that, if we needed to, there's, 80, 100 million pounds worth of talent sitting there.
And I think that's the key point. We would all love the utopian view that all these players would stay forever, and we get to see absolutely all the best of them. We're also all pragmatists in this call, and I'd imagine pragmatists in the wider Rangers community as well, in that there's a player trading business model. And so therefore the Euros, much like any sort of tournament in general, is a shop window with fans or no fans type of thing. And the question was just to try and make sure that we could flush out, who could be that. I think I agree with you in terms of age, etc. It would probably be in the Helander Barisic terminology there. But actually, if I turn that question round about and CJ, I'll start with yourself, because it's a good open door to take us through that into, as we look at the post. I almost say post-coital there, but post...
It feels like that. It does.
It certainly feel like it for a long, long time, to be honest with you. The post-championship glow, I have to say, get my teeth around that one. The post-championship glow, in terms of, we've added the likes of, let's say, Wright and Simpson, who were bought for the future, but were able to come in early. We've got Offerblom, we've got Sakala as well coming into the club. As we look at the squad, do we feel it is absolutely CL ready, or indeed, where do you think upgrades need to occur?
I think you'd always want to kind of push forward. You didn't ever want to stand still, because that's when people catch you. I think you'd always want to add other pieces, and I think the business we've done with, like Simpson, you've mentioned, Scotty Wright, I think Sakala's going to be a very, very exciting player. If he's half as good as his interviews and how much he's talking, what a player we're actually in for. But you've heard it by Gerrard, you've even heard it by the players themselves. They welcome the competition, they welcome the quality going into that dressing room, and I just feel like that is what it will be. I don't think there'll be that one player that's going to come in and push, say, an Alfie out the way or a rank. It's none of that. It's just adding more rounded quality into your team to make us even stronger as a unit, because that's what's got us through in the league. It's having that strength and depth. When the 11, just say a couple of injuries or someone needs to be rested, we've had that rotation. There hasn't been that gap now between the starting 11 and the bench, and obviously we're going to take a massive step up when we go to the Champions League. But even in saying that, look at some of the teams we've played in the Europa League. I don't think it's going to be much harder than the likes of Benfica, who spent 100-odd million in the summer. We played Porto not too long ago, and you seen what they were doing in the Champions League. So I don't think the jump from the Champions League to Europa League as big as a lot of people's making it out to be. But again, there is obviously the mouth-watering ties and more of the type of game. So it's definitely going to be difficult, but I just feel like there's going to be pieces added just to strengthen the overall unit.
I think as well that it's the... Sorry, Tommy. I think as well it's the attraction thing.
Exactly.
If we can offer Champions League football, then it becomes easier to sign players. It does.
Definitely.
The one guy actually, just as Tommy was asking the question there, and I was listening to everyone's response. An interesting thing I thought might be if you flipped it and said, right, okay, we know that we've got to probably sell one or two players. Who are the one over kind of, I'm not talking about a Tav who's, just signed a new deal or whatever. I'm talking about, of the ones who would be the least likely that you would, or the one you would least want to go. And for me, I would have to say that's probably Kent.
Yep.
I think one, he's really happy here, and don't underrate that as a quality. But again, improvement year on year. And while I'm not normally a fan of anything Derek Ferguson says, he said an interesting thing a few weeks ago in the Blues Brothers pod, where he was asked his player of the year, and he said, well, I'm going for Ryan Kent because I asked Lewis Ferguson, obviously at Aberdeen, and he says he is the one guy that you sit down with your teammates and go, how do we stop him? And we all go, no idea.
Yeah. No, mate, I'm not just to kind of piggyback your answer there, but it would be Ryan Kent for me. He adds something to this Rangers team that I didn't think anyone else is, and that's not me being disrespectful to anybody else. He is the heartbeat to the Rangers machine this year, and you can see his progression. He's getting better. He's two-footed, and
numbers are coming in now.
And I mean, he's bought 2 crocodiles, so he's obviously happy here. He's gone named. That's what I'm saying. All right, he's got crocodiles. Everything's fine. We don't need to worry.
I love that.
That's probably spot on. I think that's probably spot on there in terms of he's probably that one player that other teams have to plan around accordingly. But Stevie, if I flip back to your good self there, because there's an interesting comment that CJ made, and I'm with him. I don't think the actual step up into the Champions League is as big as a lot of people think. There's just a small core of teams inside that are stellar because of their budgets. How important do you think it will be for for this CL tilt coming up, so to speak, that we've cycled through that cohesion, those challenges on the road and at home with some really, really top tier budgeted teams in the Europa League?
Yeah, I think it's vitally important, as much as it was important to the growth of the team at the time it was happening. But when you play the Benficas and Villarreals and things, it can only heighten your appetite, but it'll never prepare you for the levels that are actually out there. Don't forget, if we are lucky enough to qualify, and it's a very tough task to do that, if we're lucky enough to qualify, we'll probably be 4 seeds, which means that there's 3 potentially huge clubs above us. So if we get to that level, then it's a playground for us in terms of just enjoying it and seeing how well we do. But go back to something that CJ says, and I completely agree. We can't afford to stand still. I don't think there's a lot of business to be done this summer, but we have to make sure it's critically right. I don't think there'll be a lot of money spent, in terms of probably similar to last summer again, and that would be, fantastic considering the investment by the board and things at this moment. But if we're lucky enough, we need to make sure that they are signings of the quality of last season, the likes of Kamar Roof, etc. So we have to make it count. I do think that we need to significantly upgrade our midfield in terms of numbers and options, whether it's one, whether it's two, whether it's even three. So we do have work to do in there. The rest of the team, I'm pretty happy with. We've got lots of cover up front. We've got 95 centre-backs. So we're absolutely fine basically everywhere.
A lot of centre-backs.
Soon going to be a Walter Smith side with them playing right back, left wing, etc.
10 at the back, let's go.
But yeah, I would like to see some investment in midfield, definitely.
I think we need legs in the midfield as well. Just obviously with Scotty Arfield, and I absolutely love the boy Stephen Davis, and he's just had an incredible year. But we have more legs. I think that's what we tried to do when we brought Zungu into the team and that as well. But obviously with how well Davis went and played the entire year, Zungu really couldn't get it in. When he didn't do too much to actually say, no, I deserve more starts. But I just feel like more energy, more legs, and again a couple of guys that just goes in there and absolutely nails challenges. That'd be nice.
So David, actually to you, how important, just to put a twist on that for a moment, how important is Ross Wilson at the moment?
Well, look, this is how it's supposed to work. That is the in a way the most important person at the club. Now, I think all traditionalists will always say the manager, and a good or a bad manager can screw you up. But if the manager doesn't have the support and doesn't get given the materials to work with, then you can be a wonderful manager, but if you don't have the players, and I always go back to Pep Guardiola's first season at Man City, where he just didn't have the squad, and then he got the squad, and wow. And I think that to a degree that's been the case at Rangers. Also, we trust in our recruitment, and we're a bloody demanding support, and yet I think we all agree that, right, we'll probably lose one or two, but you're confident that they'll bring in some. Now, some won't work. I think that's fair to say. Some players that we sign will be punts, but then even if you look at the guys who've been punts over the last 12 months, you would say Simpson, okay, jury's still out. Scott Wright, success already.
You're very lucky you said success there when Steve in the chat.
I wouldn't have brought it up otherwise, I'm not ready. But look, for what, 100 grand, 150 grand, brilliant. He's already made a contribution, and again, I'm excited to see what develops in the future because he's a quality player. I think that Ross Wilson has a strategic vision, and both of those terms are important because it's all right having a vision. Mark Warburton had a vision, but you need to have a strategy on how to get there. And I think Wilson has both. I think that he knows what he wants his Rangers team to be. And by that, I mean, background. But he also has a plan in place on how we're going to get there, which is very, very important. Ross Wilson's CV suggested we were getting somebody good. That is important. And again, when we're seeing an almost Herculean level of turd polishing going on in the Scottish media at the moment, that yes, you can be sold something and told that it's wonderful, but in black and white, when you're reading down somebody's CV, he looked like somebody who would bring that level of professionalism to the club. Rangers are just we're streets ahead of everybody else at the moment in the SPFL in terms of professionalism, but we're streets ahead of where Rangers have been probably since the 90s. And part of our problem is in the 90s we were dynamic, but we just refused to change. So what happened is what had been cutting edge stopped being cutting edge. And that'll be a challenge for these guys as their methods, will they be able to evolve as football evolves? But that's for another day. At the moment, you get the impression that these are guys who are very much at the top of their game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all know that evolution and revolution, to bastardise what you said earlier, has to continue. If I turn back to yourself, Stevie, for a moment, we've discussed at length here on this pod the process of building a successful team on the pitch. Rangers are very much in the business of building success off it as well, and we've seen dramatic changes behind the scenes there, none more so than the recent announcements, etc., and some of the pictures of the Rangers Museum. And I'll touch on some other things about share issues in a while as well. But I'm really interested from your perspective. We've also touched on things like culture, the way that the media reacts in this country, etc. How important is it for Rangers, the Rangers community, and the wider Rangers diaspora to be able to tell our story and what it means to people in our own museum?
I think it's years overdue in terms of a club our size should really be having that. The new, I mean, Edmondson Drive, the Edmondson House, a new idea for it, with a concert space, for live nights out, David, Heart and Hand,
yes,
etc.
100%, absolutely.
These are all, this is what we should have. And what we have now, not only is, you touched on Ross Wilson, but Stephen Gerrard, etc., but we've now got James Bisgrove, who, obviously he's been on Heart and Hand recently. Going to be speaking to him soon, hopefully myself. But he's, tripled Rangers' commercial investment. He's bringing in close to £10 million extra revenue and things. And he has a vision of where we should be, what we should be doing, and even stuff like the pub where the current shop is and things like that. This is all exciting revenue for the club. Even if these things don't pan out and don't necessarily work the way we want, I get the impression with James Bisgrove that, say we can't put a pub in the corner of the stadium, we'll find another way to put it somewhere and get that revenue in, because he's all about revenue, and he's all about, you look at the amount of partners we have at the moment, and it's all about growth and commercial kind of building. I'd love to ask him where he sees Rangers being, because what his end game and where he wants them to go, that would be a really interesting question for him. But in terms of appointments and things we've done, Ross Wilson is vital. James Bisgrove is just as important for me. And when you look at the museum, you look at Edmondson House and things, these are things this is something that we should be really proud of, and being able to have that space and do that and tell that story is incredible. And if you look at, obviously the trophy room is iconic, but the trophy room, as the showpiece, it doesn't necessarily tell the story in terms of, I've been to Old Trafford and done the Old Trafford tour, and their museum section is unbelievable. You can watch, documentaries. You can be in there for hours and hours watching documentaries of their European Cup wins and stuff. And I think that a club our size should definitely have an area where we can tell the story of 1972, and many other things. It's actually a friend of mine from back home, Joe Morrison, who you would have heard Stuart Robertson talking about. He's actually the curator for the museum, and he's gathering everything. And some of the stuff that he's told us is going to be in there, that he's found in boxes and things in Ibrox, is unbelievable. And we'll be hopefully speaking to him soon, David, on Heart and Hand. So, so excited about the museum, and it's a chance just to tell our story. We've got so much history, and I mean the really bad parts and the fantastic parts. It's our story, and we should be proud of it, and we should be telling everybody, in the world, and help spread our story.
If you don't mind, I'd like to come in on something there. One of the things that I know that we all get, all of us that are on this podcast tonight, is that whenever you say something positive, because this has been a positive, we're excited and you can hear it, and we're praising people at the club, and what you get told is, well, you're just saying that because you have some ulterior motive.
Yeah.
In my case, well, it's your mates and they give you passes, and you want this, Stevie, and CJ, you want that, Tommy, you want this, and it's like, guys, the 10 years we've just had, let us be happy. This.
Yeah,
and you should be happy too. And if it goes tits up in a year, we will say this is shite. But right now, what you're asking us to do is to look round and say, see the commercial manager that raised it by 3 times Nah, fuck him. See the good recruitment that Ross Wilson's done. Aye, but he did sign this guy, and he was rubbish. I'm sorry. I've spent 10 years where everything was at times a chore and negative, and maybe some people are just addicted to that. But it's football. There will be loads that will come along soon, and that's just the reality of it. So right now, yeah, we are upbeat, yeah, we are positive, and we might be wrong. And then, a year or in 2 years, but it's one of the kind of few things that annoys me is when people do say that you must have an ulterior motive, and you think that's you projecting onto me. You're thinking you can't just be that happy. Well, I can. I'm a simple fellow. Rangers going undefeated, playing great football, scoring a worldie every week, getting to the last 16 of the Europa League, and winning the title by 106 points. That is enough to make me happy. I admit it.
And I think we can all get online with that. And CJ, before I turn to you with the final question, it's really interesting coming off the back of that, our history conversation, and I'll take my opportunity to plug and say you can read some about that history in my upcoming book, Rangers 101 from Flaris Publishing, out in October. Pre-order it now. There we go.
Look forward to that.
Yeah, just edit that one out, guys. CJ, I turn to your good self, buddy. I'm really interested. Over the last couple of days, Rangers obviously announced a fundamental shift in the shareholding of the club and reaching out to the support, 500 minimum buy-in, all that type of thing. But not just the nuts and bolts of it. I'm really, really interested from people who've cycled through all of the good and bad of the club. How much of a watershed moment of this is this when it comes to the fan involvement in the club, but also the rectification of some previous wrongs and things that used to be on the table?
Well, this is exactly what we've wanted now for so long. For as long as I can remember even for the younger days and everything, hearing my dad and everything like that, it was like the more fans are invested in a football club, the more they've got the control, the safer the football club is. And I mean, if you look at the teams over in the Bundesliga, the way they've got their thing set up with fan ownerships and how much control in that they've got, it's incredible to watch over there. And I'm just happy that now we're getting into a space that fans are able to put the money, if they can afford it, obviously, if they can put their money out there and get more control of the football club, and again assure its safety for the next 100 years. And for me, that's everything. That's everything we've ever wanted. So I've got nothing but praise. You get all the crazy people online and the people from the other side saying, "Oh, they're needing this and this." That's a lot of bollocks. The club's given us exactly what we want, and that's the chance to be more invested in the football club.
Do you know why they're doing it right now? And I mean, it's because they can. And because it's a good time to ask. We're buying chocolate for £8, for fuck's sake, right? Castor,
it's the best chocolate I've ever ate with.
I'm not eating it. £8, Jesus, it's on a plinth in here. But Castor could bring out a bin bag with RFC on it, and it'll get it for £80, and people will buy it. So that's why they're doing it. They're cashing in while the iron is hot. Because some people, I don't know if it's an agenda or just a strange need to moan. I've heard, because I said, "Oh, this is quite a good idea," money going into the club. They're like, "Oh, you're Mr. Fan Ownership." You were like, I don't recall saying don't invest in Club 1872 either, because you can do both. I mean, I'm going, I've signed up for this and all, but there is a difference, because you get people out there. And I know this because I grew up with my grandfather and my father were shareholders, and to them that was huge. It was it was an emotional thing. They would never join Club 1872, right? Because they wouldn't want fan ownership, but they do want to own a share in Rangers. Yeah. But people like me who do believe in fan ownership, we still have Club 1872. It's the best of both worlds. And again, I don't quite understand why it always needs to be in...
a bad thing.
Yeah, but always needs to be in competition and always needs to be diametrically opposed. I hope that I'm able to invest in this upcoming share issue. I haven't cancelled my direct debits to Club 1872, and I'm not going to. But there are people out there who will make different choices based on their money. Surely, if money goes to Rangers one way or the other, that's a good thing. Yep. And if someone doesn't believe in fan ownership, I hope I'll be able to persuade them over the years about why I believe in it. But if not, and they want to put a couple of £1,000 into my club that will help us be more competitive on the pitch, then by all means, let's have that opportunity for them to do it. And again, I think at times you just need to question why, when people come up with reasons and come up with, negative thing, I don't believe it is. To me, it's quite exciting because you've got Club 1872. They're doing their big drive for legacy members, and they're hoping to get to 20,000 of them. And then you've got other fans who will never be reached by that, because there are some people who are just dead set against it. I know that after years at the RST, but they'll invest in this. So to me, I'm with CJ. I think it's the right thing at the right time. You can't ask after. Can you imagine if they'd asked for this last summer? I don't think it would have done very well, right?
If we didn't win the league this year.
100%, forget it, right? So, I've heard people say things like, cash grab. Well, it's a business, and that is sort of their job. And at the end of the day, if you don't want to get involved in it, then, you obviously don't need to. But I think that we're going to be getting into this Champions League, and I firmly believe we'll get there. And we're going to be coming up against guys who get £170 million just for being in the league they're in. And that's before, the annual Champions League, etc., etc. We have got to try and get in as much as we can to give us the opportunity to box a wee bit at that level. So, again, I think it's heartening. And the other thing, of course, is I think any mention of a share issue sends certain dog food eating bloggers wild. I continually hope, Stevie and I have discussed this a lot, I hope for the next couple of years I am continuing to read this shite on these types of blogs, because it was partly that, it was partly their Sevco-holism that absolutely let Celtic run themselves into the ground, because they were too busy looking at us and inventing scenarios that we would find ourselves in, that they didn't bother looking. And they're now in a position where, I mean, if I had been appointed to Celtic in, last summer and told, right, Davy, you're on a mission for the Bears, run them into the ground, I honestly don't believe I could have done better.
And I think that's probably fair.
That got a raw belly laugh there. Apologies.
It's also perhaps a good place to draw the curtains down on the dance floor, so to speak, when it comes to this particular episode. And so what I do is I'll reach out and say, CJ, where can people find you and your content?
If you want to see any more or anything like that, I will be at CJNOVO992 on YouTube.
Stevie?
Yeah, Four Lads Had a Dream.blog on the net. We're also Four Lads Had a Dream on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. Quite a lot of good things on there, blog-wise and things. But podcast-wise, myself and David are doing the podcast he mentioned about Steven Gerrard, An Evolution of a Revolution, which is a lot of fun. We've had some great feedback on it. It's free to listen, hosted on Heart and Hand Patreon site. But it's 6 episodes, all about his time at Rangers and his growth to where we are now. We're looking at each season individually. We started off by looking at how he gets there. There'll be a wee Q&A for everyone to get involved in as well. And it's generally one of the best podcast things I've been involved in. And not only that, I think the reaction, David, as well, has been phenomenal. So really enjoying that. And I would urge people to definitely please check that out.
Nice one, David.
Yeah, heartandhand.co.uk, and you get our free pods, of course, every Monday and Thursday, wherever you get your podcast. But if you want to hear a wee bit more, and that's where we can do kind of in-depth stuff like Stevie just mentioned there, go to our Patreon site, patreon.com/heartandhand. But can I just say that, I'm going to get totes emosh here, lads, totes emosh. Firstly, we started doing this a year ago. We haven't lost a league game since. Coincidence? All I will say is not all heroes wear capes.
Absolutely,
right?
spot on.
But, modesty forbids the four of us saying it was down to us, but if you wanted to say it, I don't think any of us would argue with you. But the quality of the Rangers fan media this year, not just us, there's loads of other guys out there as well, but Stevie's articles have been brilliant. CJ's videos are superb. He's now even just pure entertainment for his gaming streams, and he's now bloody sitting gaming with bloody Rangers legends. Not that I'm jealous. The quality and depth from TII is superb as well, including the women's show, the new women's show, which is absolutely brilliant. I think you've dedicated channel for that now, in fact, over at This Is Ibrox. Yeah. I would be confident to put up Rangers fan media against any media coverage in this country. I would be absolutely content to walk in with us and several of the other guys who are producing stuff and say, right, we will put this up against anybody in terms of quality, and I think we would win.
Oh, mate.
Here to that particular point, and I'll bookend it then by saying you can get, obviously, www.thisisibrox.co.uk. Our Twitter handle is at thisisibrox and at TII Women for that women's channel that David has just referenced there. And I would bookend it all by saying it has been a fantastic, record-breaking season. But when it comes to Rangers, the history-making and the record-breaking doesn't stop here. So to the wider Rangers community, to my friends on this particular podcast, bye for now.